Okay, hello and good evening, everyone. It's been a couple of months since we last saw each other. Welcome to tonight's presentation on celebrating the Chinese New Year with tasty and healthy Chinese cuisine, featuring our good friends Arash and Shelley Wood. We have a really fun and tasty presentation for all of you to take into. Plus, it's the year of the tiger, right, Arash and Shelley?
That's my favorite animal.
Yeah, mine too. Mine too. Anyhow, all right. So just as usual, everyone has been muted, and that way we could keep any background noise to a minimum, if not zero. But if you have any questions throughout the presentation, use the chat feature on your Zoom screen to communicate those questions, and Shelley and I would sort of drop in periodically and ask Arash your question. So no worries about that. Second thing is that we are recording tonight's presentation, and Arash has made a commitment to make the recipes available to you. And what we're going to do is that by this weekend, we're going to send you an email with the recording of tonight's presentation, as well as the recipes, especially for those people that weren't able to join us tonight. That way you could start working on your Chinese New Year cuisine. And finally, we're just grateful to NorCal SCI's generous donors who continue to support us to make programs like this available. So thanks to them. And we're happy to be doing these all throughout the year. And both Arash and Shelley have made that commitment as well. So I'm grateful to the two of them too. Okay, so let's get started by a little introduction to the two of them. Shelley is a lifelong advocate of nutrition. When she isn't working with her patients, she can be found in her greenhouse or kitchen. She obtained her BS degree in nutritional science from San Jose State University in 2012, her master's in public health in 2016 from the University of New England, and has been working at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, one of the top spinal cord injury rehabilitation hospitals in the country since 2013. She currently works in the outpatient clinic of the hospital, seeing primarily those with SCI, and also spends time working with the complex gastroenterology issues in the outpatient gastroenterology clinic. And she's also a member of NorCal SCI's advisory board. Arash experienced his C5, C6 incomplete spinal cord injury in 2012 as a result of a fall. He has given numerous talks and shared his story of perseverance, recovery, and challenging limits to audiences large and small, including a TEDx talk. He's a Bay Area native and credits his California upbringing for his love of the outdoors, nature, and cooking, activities that he still cherishes as he continues to travel, explore, and enjoy new experiences. He's married with a daughter, and as well as a, gosh, is he a year? No, not quite a year old.
He's a year.
Wow, oh my gosh,
Whoa,
a year-old son.
that was so fast.
And also and also serves on NorCal SCI's board of directors. So it is my pleasure to turn things over to my good friends Arash and Shelley.
All
Everyone,
right.
Happy New
Hello,
Year.
Shelley. Hello, everybody.
So we have a fun presentation for you. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm going to talk about Chinese or Lunar New Year.
Yeah, I think it's a really fun theme. The Lunar New Year is coming up in a couple of weeks, a matter of days. Celebrated in China, but also in a number of other East Asian countries, Taiwan, parts of Vietnam. Really a huge celebration. You know, I'll say it at the beginning, I'm not Chinese. I don't celebrate Chinese New Year, but I love the food. And so tonight's theme is just really being inspired by the Lunar New Year and doing a couple of things to celebrate the cuisine of China and the area. And again, I'm not doing things like exactly how it's done in terms of in the kitchen. We're just drawing that inspiration and using it as an opportunity to talk about a wonderful cuisine. So we have some great stuff planned as always. Two main things we're going to do tonight. Both are traditional for Chinese New Year. One is making dumplings or wontons. And that's a very traditional part of Chinese New Year cuisine of various types, obviously, but we're gonna do one. And I'm gonna show you guys a couple of ways to use those dumplings or wontons. And then another is typically they call it longevity noodles, which is a noodle dish that can be in a broth or on its own. I'm going to make it in a broth, just so using that inspiration. We have a third bonus dish. If we have time to get there, we will. If not, no worries. But yeah, welcome.
And the Chinese New Year is on February 1st, everyone, right? Arash?
February 1st. This year, yep, it's on February 1st. Yep.
Inspiration's a good word to use actually for this year, because we're going to be taking on quite a few themes, I think, for the year. This was exciting for me to look into and appreciate the culture and look into some of the dishes, and putting the spin on it is always fun. I do enjoy Chinese food as well. I don't eat it too often. But this is a great opportunity to look into traditional foods for Lunar New Year and think about healthy ways to prepare them and enjoy them and celebrate.
Yeah. Should we jump into it?
Let's jump in. Just let me know when. I
have
have some notes that I looked into, and I'll read them during times of work and prep for you.
Perfect. As always, we make a great team, Shelley. So yeah, let's jump in. We're gonna start with the timing's important. So I'm gonna jump around a little bit. We're gonna make dumplings, and for the dumplings tonight, I'm using some shrimp. I don't use a ton of meat or seafood in general, so this isn't a bit of an exception. But I do like the way shrimp combines with some veggies. So I am going to use some shrimp. I'm going to start kind of talking a little bit about that in terms of how to prep and do that. And we're going to make the filling. We're going to let it kind of marinate a little and get happy, and then we're going to jump to the noodles and kind of go back and forth. It won't be too confusing, but I'm super excited about tonight. So let's get right into it. I'm going to flip the camera around if that's okay. All right, good. Great. So I have frozen shrimp that I bought. I already bought it peeled, and it came frozen. I have about a half a pound that I thawed here. And I already prepped some of this ahead of time, but I kept a couple to show you a couple of important things about using it. So when you're using shrimp, you ideally want to devein the shrimp. It's a lot of work. It's part of the reason why I don't use it very often. I'm a little lazy, but you don't have to do this step, but it does make a little bit of a difference. And what deveining means is kind of grabbing the shrimp one at a time, cutting open on the back, and sometimes there's not much there. This one looks okay, but then on the other side of the shrimp, on like the stomach side, there's this little black line, and that's the shrimp's intestinal tract. That's where the food the shrimp was eating was living, and it's usually kind of black and looks kind of like that. So it's not the tastiest thing. If you don't do this, it's not a huge deal. Oftentimes you can buy the seafood where they've also deveined it as well. But this is an extra step. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right and get this out. But again, you don't have to do this. What you do have to do for this, and the reason we're using shrimp is that it's a nice sticky kind of thing. And I'm combining it with some vegetables as well. But I already did most of this already. I'm just gonna chop this shrimp up into like just finely chop it. And this is important. You can have some chunks in there, but you do want some nice small chunks of shrimp. And so that's what we're doing here. And it's the Shelley can talk about some of the nutritional aspects, of course, better than me. I will say, if you don't know about shrimp and the way it's produced, do read up on it a little bit. It does have a little bit of a dirty story behind it. The labor that's used to to peel the shrimp often is it's not exactly the greatest way. I'll just say it like that. So it's something to keep in mind, that if you're interested, do a little reading about it, because it's really easy to get that bag of shrimp and how convenient it is, but that convenience comes at a cost. So that's all I'll say. So I've chopped this up pretty fine, and now I'm going to add it to the bowl here where I have the other stuff here. And because this is seafood, I use the raw shrimp on this board. I'm going to get rid of this board, put it in the sink, wash my hands, and come back to finish the filling. And Shelley, if you have any initial thoughts.
Yeah, so thanks for mentioning that about the shrimp. Do look into that. I have shrimp maybe once a year, if that. It is, I mean, as with anything, there is some nutrition to be had. I mean, there's nutrition in a candy bar, but shrimp, so it is high in protein. It's low in calories. It is rich in selenium, which is a mineral. It's an essential trace mineral, and it's a nutrient that's responsible for cognition and immune system function. It has a bunch of choline in it, which is needed to form membranes that surround your body cells. It has B12, which is a vitamin that you get from animals. It comes from bacteria. So there's a lot of nutritional benefit to shrimp when you do have it. So with that being said, once in a while it's okay, but you know, we're always a big advocate on getting our protein from plant sources. But this is a special dish, and shrimp can be tasty. So we're putting this into the dumplings.
So speaking of vegetables, is there such a thing as a vegetarian dumpling, Arash?
Oh, for sure. There are. And I've made some sometimes. I just didn't feel super confident for tonight. And I've made some. And the key with a dumpling filling is you want it to bind together really well. So if you just put a bunch of like raw vegetables in there, they'll cut the wrapper. It'll become a little messy. They won't stick together. It's a little bit tricky. So for the sake of this, and I know a lot of people like shrimp, I just went with it. But there are plenty of vegetarian options. And in fact, as always, I always try to make things more healthful. So in addition to the shrimp, I'm adding just a little bit of shredded cabbage and spinach that I cooked ahead of time. I didn't season it. I didn't do anything to it. I just cooked it in a tiny little bit of oil and water just to get the liquid out of it. And I'm going to add that to my bowl of chopped shrimp. So I have the shrimp and the vegetable filling, and now I'm just adding some flavor. I'm chopping up some scallions or green onions. This is a very common ingredient in a lot of Chinese cuisine. They use scallions more often than they do like yellow onions or red onions. So it's a good ingredient to become familiar with. I'm just chopping everything up as fine as I can. And then I'm just gonna add a couple more seasonings to this. So over here I have some chopped up garlic, some chopped up ginger. I'm just gonna add a healthy pinch. And don't worry, since I'm sending the recipes later on, you guys will have the approximate proportions of these. But I have that. And then to add some flavor to it, some seasoning is we're going to use a little bit of soy sauce instead of salt. And Shelley's going to talk about, you know, the awareness of sodium and whatnot. And it is easy to get carried away when you're using soy sauce because it tastes really good and it has a ton of salt. But you need to season your food anyway. So I'm just not going to use normal salt and use soy sauce instead. So I'm going to add just about a teaspoon maybe of soy sauce, a little splash of rice vinegar. This is a great ingredient to get for any kind of like stir fries or Chinese food or Asian foods. Rice vinegar is awesome. And I always say get the unseasoned one. And that means that it doesn't have sugar because other vinegars will add sugar. And then white pepper. This is a common ingredient in Chinese cuisine as well. I love it. It makes me sneeze always. It's really, really fine pepper. And it has a very different flavor than black pepper. If you can't find it, not a big deal. Use black pepper. It's totally fine. But I keep some of this specifically for times like these. So just a little pinch, a little goes a long way. It does have a pretty strong kind of flavor. And a sneeze is coming. And then I told you guys.
Mute.
Yeah, it always comes. And then just a little splash of sesame oil. And then usually for dumpling filling, I'm gonna see how this goes. It is good to add like 1 egg just to help bind it. I'm gonna mix this up first because I feel like maybe the shrimp will be enough, but if not, I'm gonna add an egg and mix this all up. So I've added everything to my bowl here. I'm gonna just stir this up and let it sit for a few minutes and hand it back to Shelley at the moment.
Okay, so you mentioned the magic word that comes up with every presentation that we do, and that is salt. Yes, sodium. So another thing to watch for with more common Chinese menu items and traditional Lunar Year foods is salt. Traditional Chinese foods can be really high in salt or sodium because of sauces like soy sauce, oyster, fish sauce. They're often used as well as chili and hot sauces, which can be pretty high in sodium. So just a reminder, and I'm always going to bring this up, is that a high sodium diet is directly linked to increased risk for cardiovascular disease. And cardiovascular disease right now is the leading cause of death for those who have spinal cord injuries. So we want to be very careful with salt in your diet. I am going to start adding a little disclaimer. The more I work in this area with the community, the more I realize, there's a lot of hypotension out there with low blood pressure. In that case, I think my recommendation is still going to be mindful of salt. Avoid eating salt as much as possible, avoid processed food, and then you can work with your medical team, physiatrist, your primary care doctor about adding sodium chloride tablets to your day instead of adding processed foods and salt to your diet. So you could do all these things, but if you have hypotension, blood pressure issues, work with your team and just add sodium chloride and work with them on doing that instead of having a ton of soy sauce on your food.
Shelley, what can you tell us about MSG?
Oh, you want to go there now?
I'm sure you were going to cover it, but
I am.
We can wait until then.
Okay, let me know when I have a window.
Yes. You will have a good window just now because I need to make a few of these wontons.
Okay.
So I will just explain what I'm going to do and then get to work and hand it back to you if that's okay, Shelley.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Great. So I stirred up my stuffing here. I did add an egg because I want it to be a little sticky, and now it's just perfect. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wonton wrappers. And guys, I made an effort this time. I bought everything at like a very normal, at a Safeway, a normal grocery store. So none of this is stuff that you need to go to a specialty store to get. So I wanted it to really be accessible for everybody to say, oh, I can't find this, I can't find that. In this case, I bought, they call it gyoza wrappers. Gyoza is the Japanese dumplings, but it's the same thing. It's just little wrappers. These ones are round. Oftentimes I like the square, but I went with what I know. So all I'm gonna do is take a wrapper and I'm going to put a very small amount of filling, less than you think. I've made this mistake many times. So like the tip of my spoon, even that's a little too much. But anyway, that's my amount of filling in here. And then I've got a small bowl here just with water. And what I do is I dip my finger and I wet just half of the wrapper. So this side's wet, this side is not. And all I do is fold this over. The water helps it stick. And apparently, I'm not going to do this for each one because that'll take way too long. But apparently I learned that for Chinese New Year, the more pleats you have in a dumpling, the better. So I'm just going to use a fork and just kind of press in here and give it a couple of pleats to make it look a little nicer. And there's your dumpling.
That's beautiful.
I'm gonna do just one more and show you guys one other thing, because when I do make wontons fairly regularly, I don't know, 2-3 times a year, and I like to do this, is I'm just gonna show you an alternate way of rolling this or putting it together. So I dip the water, my finger in the water, I have the filling, again, a very small amount. It's really easy to get carried away and overfill your dumpling, but you don't wanna do that. So I'm gonna fold it over, press it down, and if you have weak fingers or something, if you can do some of this, it's a good kind of OT exercise. I look at this as like a fun finger kind of exercise for me, because I don't have great dexterity. So I've got my dumpling here. The other thing I'll do, I'll dip my finger one more time. I'll put a little water on this corner, and then I'm gonna fold the dumpling and seal it over here, and that's a wonton, and that's how you end up with like.
That's so cool.
So I'll put that there. I'm gonna make a few of these and pass it back to you, Shelley.
Okay. One thing I learned from you though, Arash, when we were talking about the menu for tonight, is the dumplings, they're made to look like Chinese silver ingots, right? And I looked up silver ingots. They're metal castings of pure silver, and so this is kind of what they're made to look like, which I found pretty interesting. So I guess we'll go to MSG now. So there's some history. I think I have a little time here. So there's a little history about MSG. That is monosodium glutamate. If you're curious about it, people started talking about this flavor enhancer in the late 60s when a scientist, Dr. Kwok, wrote about strange symptoms that he experienced after eating Chinese foods. His symptoms were numbness, weakness, and heart palpitations. MSG is it's a chemical variant of glutamate, and glutamate's a substance that occurs naturally in high umami foods like Parmesan cheese, walnuts, soy sauce, tomatoes. Umami is one of the 5 core tastes that we know of: sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami. And umami means essence of deliciousness in Japanese, and it's the taste of glutamate, which is one of the building blocks of protein. So it's natural. Chinese population, they're the biggest MSG producers and consumers in the world. But MSG alone doesn't taste like much, but when it's added to other foods, which it often is, it boosts their savoriness and their overall flavor profile. So it's used in quite a few things, not only Chinese foods, but also canned soup, frozen dinners, cold cuts, salad dressing, Doritos. The FDA estimates that people in the United States consume about 0.5 gram of MSG every day. Now, remember, the majority of people in the US consume a lot of processed foods, and that's kind of where the MSG lives, along with sodium and other things. The safety of MSG is really confusing. A lot of researchers suggest that symptoms occur in conjunction with excessive sodium intake and alcohol intake. So basically, you're going to go to the restaurant, you're not just going to be eating MSG, you're going to be probably drinking a little, and you're definitely going to be consuming a lot of sodium. So a lot of these symptoms could be any of those things or all of them together at restaurants. And so this makes it really hard to tell if it's a single ingredient or a whole meal. So they've done a lot of really high quality studies over the years, but they have failed to demonstrate significant symptoms with MSG. So if this is still a concern to you, then just switching to a simple plant-based diet, seasoning with herbs and spices, highlighting foods that are in season, that's like the best, most efficient way to enhance flavor in your diet. And much of what Arash talks about every time we do a presentation is based on enhancing flavor using the most natural ingredients possible. So I seriously doubt that, Arash, you have MSG in your cupboard.
I don't have MSG. I don't use it. And just to add to that conversation, a lot of the symptoms that people have said over time they felt for MSG, oftentimes it's also, like you said, associated with the salt, but then also it was associated with kind of a discriminatory thing back in the day of like, oh, Chinese food is this and Chinese food is that. A lot of people don't realize that even like a lot of pizza, especially when you get pizza from, when you get it takeout, they use MSG. So it's important to keep that in mind. A lot of people, point that out, that it's a little bit controversial, but I think, Shelley, your point is spot on, that it's really just the consumption of really, really salty food that does that. And so far, I have 45 wrappers here. I don't know how many wontons I'll make with this amount of filling, but I used about a teaspoon of soy sauce for this entire thing. So, of course, there'll be a little more when you're like dipping it or, eating it later on. But as we always say, Shelley and I both really believe, when you're making something at home, you can control so much better. So it's so much better to make something at home, and then it doesn't have to be salty, or you can make it less salty or do whatever you like to it. That's what I always.
And food is supposed to be fun. That's why I'm a dietitian. In the end, food is fun and it's enjoyable, and it's a great way to come together. It's just having healthy cooking habits the majority of the time, and eating more plant-based. That's kind of where the health comes in. So I love watching what you're doing.
Yeah, and I've made, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, looks like about 10 of these. So I'm going to stop here for now, and I'm going to show us one way of making these on their own, and I'll make the rest of these later on. But I'm just going to heat up my frying pan and get that going and pass it back to you, Shelley.
Okay. So I have a little more. I took a lot of notes for this. I want to talk a little bit more about Chinese cultural foods. So many cultures center their food around heritage and identity, and the Chinese culture is definitely no exception. Many traditional Chinese foods are high in fat, and they are drenched in high sodium sauces, especially during the holidays like this one, where common dishes include egg rolls and dumplings, cakes, deep fried meats, and that kind of thing. Even most Chinese restaurant menus are filled with these foods, but they really don't represent the traditional Chinese diet. Heart disease, diabetes, obesity, those have been really low among the rural Chinese people who follow a really plant-forward, plant-based diet, which is what we're always talking about and promoting. Their common staples are steamed vegetables, tea, very minimal red meat, very minimal fried foods. And that said, these rural people, they live longer, they're healthier, they have less disease. So there's something to be said about minimally processed foods, steamed foods, avoiding high fat, high sodium, that kind of thing. So I love learning about this kind of thing. So vegetables should always be the centerpiece of every meal, no matter what. And basically that is all I have to say about that.
Yeah. I wanted to mention something. I'm going to make just a few more as I'm waiting for my pan to warm up. I wanted to mention something important, and I learned this lesson the hard way once when I made wontons. Because when you make wontons, as you can see, it's a little bit of a commitment. It takes some time. And so you might not eat them all right away. So a great thing to do to preserve your wontons is, make them, lay them out on a baking sheet like this. I'm using parchment paper. And you can then freeze them. And it's a really great way to have a bunch ready to go later on. Now that said, and this is what I was going to say, I learned the lesson the hard way. If you are using frozen shrimp, like I did, I took my frozen shrimp, I thawed it. You don't want to freeze the shrimp again, because that can make you sick. So I made that mistake once. Luckily, it didn't really come back to bite me too hard. I just once we ate the wontons, I just felt a little funny. And I was like, what's going on? And then I realized, because as with any meat and whatnot, once you thaw it from being frozen, you don't want to refreeze it again. So definitely avoid that. If you think you're going to want to freeze your dumplings, then use fresh shrimp, or use something else, or use, that's the beauty if you keep it plant-based, is you don't need to worry about anything like that. But or if you're using like ground meat or something like that, or impossible meat, or whatever it is, there's a million recipes out there. But I did want to make that safety point because, like I said, I had to throw away a whole bunch of wontons because I realized that I took some frozen shrimp and refroze it. So don't want to do that. So my pan is heating up. I'm just going to show you guys one way of making these dumplings. This is kind of like when you order pot stickers at the restaurant. If you like that, I know I do. I can't see how you can't, but this is kind of the way to do that. And again, I'm making it, a much healthier way. So I've got a handful of wontons here, and I've got my pan getting pretty hot, just a regular frying pan. I'm gonna add, maybe not too much, about a teaspoon maybe of vegetable oil. And this is important. Vegetable oil, you don't want to use olive oil for stir fry cooking or this kind of cooking. It has too strong of a flavor and it has too low of a burning point. It'll burn before it'll do what you want it to. So just neutral vegetable oil. I use avocado oil, peanut oil, canola oil, anything like that. And then I'm just gonna throw my dumplings in here. And you don't want to cram them in too much. If you cram them in, then they'll start to stick together and get a little messy. You don't want that. But we're just going to toss them into the pan. So these are just kind of, we're going to pan fry them or stir fry them and then finish them kind of steaming them. So this is a really fun way. This is a good way to make the wontons if you want them as like an appetizer, as a side dish, on their own. So that's probably all I'll do. I don't want to crowd the pan any more than that. So I'm just going to let them cook for a couple of minutes on that side. I'm going to flip them. And then because I want to make sure they cook well, I'm going to add a splash of water, put the lid on and let them steam to finish. And that's a done dish right there. So, so that's what I'm going to do here. Shelley, I'll pass it back to you, or any thoughts at this moment?
Yeah, I'm jumping ahead a little bit now because you can't talk about Chinese food without talking about carbohydrates, right? We're going to be going into a noodle dish in a second here. So I'll just mention rice and noodles. They're huge staples in the diet. And there's better options when making your own version. That's why it's super fun to play in the kitchen. Your own version of different kinds of cuisines. So an obvious substitution would be brown rice for white rice, which we do anyways all the time. But you can also use 100% buckwheat soba noodles. Buckwheat's a plant that's cultivated for grain-like seeds, and it's used usually as a cover crop, not grown on traditional grass like regular wheat. You can use wheat soba noodles. You can use whole grain udon noodles. Udon's like a thick, super thick noodle made with wheat flour. It's delicious. Brown rice or shirataki noodles. Shirataki, they're the translucent, gelatinous looking traditional Japanese noodles. They're made from the konjac yam. I think I pronounced that okay. Konjac? I'm not sure. Anyways, the word shirataki means white waterfall. It's referring to the appearance of the noodles. So these are all healthy options. So if you go for the healthier grain option, you're going to get more fiber. You're going to preserve important nutrients like B vitamins, which are needed for overall health. So I encourage you to experiment with more whole grain options when you play around in your kitchen with different cuisine. Those are looking brown.
Yeah, they're nicely browned. On one side, I flipped them. And now this is going to get a little messy because oil and water don't like each other. So stand back a little bit, but I'm just going to add. So all I did was add a splash of water, just enough to coat the bottom of the pan. I'm gonna let these steam for another minute or so, couple minutes maybe, and then put it on a plate, and that's a dish ready to go. To eat with that, I like making a dipping sauce, and this is where much of the same ingredients I was talking about, a little bit of soy sauce or sesame oil, rice vinegar. I also pulled out a couple of other ingredients that I really like, and these are things you can generally find at a lot of stores. This is black bean garlic sauce, very, very tasty for like stir fries and sauces. This is oyster sauce. It's made from fermented oyster. It's used a lot in Thai cooking, Vietnamese, Chinese, Burmese, and then hoisin. Hoisin's another good one. It's a little bit sweet, but all of these have quite a bit of salt in them. So keep that in mind. When you use them, use a small amount. Don't add other salts, or, you know, if you're going to combine them, just be mindful, because that's where you can get to having your food become really salty. So I just wanted to show those to you. If I were going to eat these here, I would just probably do a little bit of soy sauce, rice vinegar, and maybe even a little tiny bit of honey for some sweetness. And that's it. You know, you can dip it in that. You can pour the sauce over it, whatever you want. But this is my version of pot stickers, and that's looking real nice. I'm going to take the lid off because I want the rest of the liquid to evaporate.
Arash, what kind of pan are you using? Arash?
I'm using, sorry. I'm using a ceramic pan. I recently made an effort to get rid of all my nonstick. I'm trying not to use nonstick anymore. There's just too many things I've read recently. So this is a ceramic. It is a nonstick pan, but that's what I'm using for this. Yeah.
How's that going for you? Is there like a breaking in period or like a seasoning period?
This is a great pan, and it's basically like a nonstick pan. Not much of a breaking in period, but when I use stainless steel or other things, it's a little bit trickier. I bought a new wok made with carbon, and that's been a little more work. I have to kind of maintain it so that it doesn't get rusty, but I'm really happy because as I use it more, it gets better. Cast iron's another great option. I know I've talked about it before. The hard thing about cast iron is it's just really heavy. If I could use cast iron for everything, I would. But with me cooking at this level with not great hands, moving a big cast iron around is kind of tough. If I had a kitchen, and in the future I would like to have a stove and a sink next to it, I could easily just slide the pan over, rinse it out, and then use it again. So that would be the solution for that. So I'm going to put this pan away because it's done. I don't want to splatter anything in the sink, so I'm just going to stick it in the oven. And I'm going to show you guys my pot stickers. How's that?
Oh, they're beautiful.
Yeah, so good. And I'm going to, oh man, oh.
I hate it when you do that. We're all drooling.
Yeah, this is not fair.
Seriously, it's not.
So I'm gonna transition right into our next dish, which is a noodle dish. So longevity noodles, they call it, is a common dish that's eaten for Chinese New Year, and that's a general thing. It's just like I said, it can be in broth, it can be dry, whatever. I'm making just a simple noodle soup, and I want to point out a couple things. So I've got my pot of water here boiling for my noodles, but my soup is separate over here. And I want to just show you guys, I'll tell you why I do it like this, and this is important, but I've got vegetable stock, and I kept these just to show you, just regular old vegetable stock from the store. I didn't do anything to it. I always buy low sodium because, again, I want to season my food myself. So I just put 2 of these things of vegetable stock into this pot, and that's just slowly simmering. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add stuff to the stock and the broth and make that the soup, but I'm cooking my noodles separately. And this is something that if you eat pho, if you eat ramen, if you eat Chinese noodle soups, any noodle soups, this is what they do. You cook the noodles separately. You don't put the noodles into the broth. And that's because if you do, it's fine, but then the noodles absorb some of the liquid And then you basically can overcook the noodles and have soggy noodles, which is no fun. So I'm gonna cook my noodles. And again, I bought these. If it were up to me, I would go to the Asian market and get really like good, you know, like more authentic, I guess you could say, you know, egg noodles or wheat noodles, or like Shelley was saying, soba, any noodle you want, it doesn't matter. But I got these just because this is what they had at Safeway. I wanted to make this night really accessible to everybody. So they just call it chow mein noodles. So they're a wheat noodle, nothing special. In a pinch, you could use spaghetti, totally fine. Don't worry, I've done it myself. So I'm gonna cook my noodles just in water. And what do they tell you? 5 minutes. So always check the package. This is for any noodle you cook. So I'm just gonna throw these in here and cook them for 5 minutes. Now, while those are cooking, I want to get my broth, my soup, actually tasting like something other than just vegetable stock. So what am I going to do? I'm going to take, same thing, I'm going to take some garlic and some ginger and add that to my stock because I want to give it that nice flavor. So a good amount of each one. And then I've got a bunch of vegetables I'm going to add into that stock. So here I've got a couple of carrots. I've got shiitake mushrooms. You can use any mushroom you like, but I like shiitakes. I'm just going to slice these up. A little bit of broccoli. I had some in my fridge. This is a great opportunity if you want to use frozen broccoli. Totally fine. Just thaw it out ahead of time. And then baby corn. I love this. This is an ingredient you see a lot in Southeast Asian cooking. It comes in a can. You just open the can. It's cooked and ready to go. You just drain the can. And so I'm just going to cut some of these up, add a little bit of bell pepper just for the nice color. And lastly, this is Joy Choy. This is from my garden. It's growing really well right now. It likes the winter climate. So it's, if you've heard of bok choy, which I also am growing and I have over there. This is a kind of relative of that. It's just smaller leaves, really, really tender, really nice. You can use spinach, you can use any other green, but I have this in my garden. So I have this growing. So all I'm gonna do right now, while I'm waiting for my noodles to cook, is I'm going to chop up these vegetables and add them into the stock and pass it back to Shelley. I am gonna, sorry, one last thing. I am gonna add the carrots, probably everything except for the greens, because these will take like 1 minute to cook. So I'm gonna chop everything up, add it to the broth, and then we're gonna season our broth last, but that's our next step. So back to you, Shelley.
Nice. So I'm going to jump on the cruciferous veggie wagon here. So a lot of cuisines have cruciferous veggies, but they're especially common in Chinese cuisine, Asian cuisine. Cruciferous veggies include like typical broccoli and cauliflower, vegetables that most people know as cruciferous, but it also includes kale, cabbage, bok choy, watercresses, radishes, Brussels sprouts, collards. Many Chinese dishes use broccoli, cabbage, and bok choy in a lot of their dishes. The cruciferous family is rich in vitamins and minerals like folate. Folate helps the body form red blood cells. They're rich in vitamin K, which helps make proteins that are needed to form blood clots and for the building of bones. Dark green varieties are a really good source of vitamin A and C, and also have phytonutrients, which I've talked about, that are plant compounds that help lower inflammation and reduce risk for developing cancer. These veggies are also really high in fiber, high in water, low in calories. I always talk about nutrient density. These are them right here. And then a fun fact, the name cruciferous, it is an informal classification for members of the mustard family, and it comes from the Latin word crucifera, meaning cross-bearing, because the 4 petals resemble a cross when you see them. And I'm super impressed by your garden, as always.
Yeah, we're lucky to live where we do. We can garden all year round. And while gardening in the summer is kind of like easy and sexy, and you know, you're growing your tomatoes and zucchinis and pretty much everything, but I love winter gardening. That's when I can grow things that it's just too hot to grow here in the summer. Things like these greens, kale, chard, spinach, lettuce, cilantro, parsley. My garden right now is like starting to explode with all that stuff. It's tough because the days are really short. There's not as much sunlight, so everything grows really slowly. But it's really fun to do that.
Winter gardening will test you, won't it?
Yes, winter gardening test.
We're doing cover crops a lot this winter. We alternate, so we'll be doing fava beans.
Hey, Shelley, a question for you, I think. What are the nutritional values of the dumplings in terms of calories and other sort of?
That's a good question. It depends on what you add to them or on them. So obviously the wrapper's got some carbohydrate, and he put shrimp, so there's some protein in there, and the vegetables are more carbohydrate. I would say most of the calories for dumplings are going to come from the fat that you cook it in, because fat is more than twice the amount of calories per gram than carbs and protein. So they can be quite high in calories if you fry them with a lot of fat. And then again, whatever sauce that you mix them with, if you're adding oil to that, that'll be even more calories there. And then of course the good old fashioned salt. But if you're following a low sodium diet, you probably won't want to use much of it because it'll be overwhelming for you. So hopefully that answers the question there.
Yeah, and I can add to that and say that you'd have to eat a lot. I mean, I made like I think maybe 15 dumplings so far. There's 45 in this entire package. You can look at the package and do the math. I mean, you'd have to eat like 30 or 40 dumplings to get a lot out of the wrappers. And then the filling, like I said, it's a half pound of shrimp for this entire thing. It's going to make a lot of that. So you can do the math yourself. I'll do the recipes. I'm not going to do the caloric breakdown.
It's minimal. It's minimal until you really throw it in oil.
And as you guys saw, I used minimal amounts of everything. Yeah. So just using, like doing it like I did, you could eat this plate of dumplings and, it's not a ton,
yeah, several hundred calories depending on how much.
Actually, I'm going to move this. So my noodles, I drained. They're perfect. I poured some cold water on them because I'll show you guys. I just want them to stop cooking. And all you do now is you just keep this ready to go. And I'll show you how to assemble the soup in a moment. But there's something that we haven't yet done. So our soup has the veggies cooking in there, but it doesn't have a lot of like flavor. It doesn't have a lot of, and nothing making it like a fun soup right now. So this is where we add our seasoning. So for a different soup, you'd add salt and pepper and spices. And this is where now we're going to add some of these same things. So again, we're going to use a little bit of soy sauce. That's our salt. But again, not a ton. We're going to do about a tablespoon to start with. You can always add more. I like some acid, as always. So I'm just using the same rice vinegar, about a tablespoon of that. And then same thing, that white pepper to give it some of that spiciness. And this is, again, you could do whatever you like. If you like sriracha, you could throw some sriracha in there. If you want a little spicy. If you wanted to add, I might just add a little bit of this hoisin because it's got a little bit of sweetness. And I know that I didn't probably add enough soy sauce for this whole pot of soup. So I'm okay adding a little bit of hoisin, knowing that it's going to give me a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of salt and tons of great flavor. So not too much, about a teaspoon at the most. That's kind of it. So I've got my garlic, my ginger, my veggies are almost cooked in there. Now I am going to add my broccoli and the joy choy, the greens at the end. Because those will literally take about a minute.
That is so beautiful. I love the color.
Isn't that nice? I mean, again, I always like to make food that you eat with your eyes, so. So I'm going to let that go for a minute. put the lid back on, and I'm gonna grab a soup bowl and show you guys how I put this thing together. So you'll do smaller ones.
Okay.
Yeah. Shelley, any other thoughts to add about any of this so far?
I think I've touched on pretty much everything I wanted to say. I don't see any opening right here, but I'm admiring your cookware, that's for sure. I like that pot. What brand is that pot?
That's a Le Creuset. It was a wedding gift. So it's a nice pot. So
yeah, you can guys, put that in the oven too.
My soup's going crazy, so I'm going to turn the heat down. So this is a small bowl. This would be like, for me, this wouldn't be enough for a meal. I also have bigger bowls. I like to eat a soup like this as its own meal, but I'm just doing a small bowl. So I just took my noodles. I just put a handful or so, about a cup of noodles, into the bottom of the bowl, and it's okay. They're not super hot, but what's going to happen is this hot broth is going to heat all this up, and this is why this is something you want to make right before you're ready to eat. You don't want to like serve this up and let it, sit for an hour or something like that. All these veggies are cooked. So all I'm going to do now is just get a nice scoop of broth and veggies.
Wow.
Put that up. How beautiful is that?
Mm-hmm.
And then to finish it off, I always love, as you guys might know, I love to add some freshness at the end. I have some cilantro in the fridge too. I forgot to pull that out. So I might add a little bit of that. But again, my green onions or scallions, chop some of these really, really fine. If the white part is like too oniony for you, just use more of the green parts. I can flip it around.
Mm-hmm.
That. And you just sprinkle some of that on. And boom, bowl of noodles.
That's
probably
gorgeous.
My favorite in the world.
Have you added tofu to this soup before?
Yeah, so I was gonna add that in. Yeah, so tofu you could add. You could add a hard-boiled egg. If you're doing meat and you want to add that in, that's fine. But you don't have to either. I like to just do it with veggies and noodles. But if you want to add whatever protein you want, I would just again cook it separately. Have it ready to go, and then assemble your bowl when you're ready to go. So if you have like a leftover rotisserie chicken, if you're a meat eater, that's a really good use. You've got some leftover meat or any kind of like leftover meat of any kind or fish. You're like, what do I do with this, day old piece of, salmon in my fridge? Just grab some, make sure there's no bones or whatever. Just put it in your bowl, put the noodles, pour the broth in. And look at that, you got a beautiful, beautiful bowl of Chinese style noodle soup. And then you can, now it's kind of fun because you can customize it however you want. If you want, a little more spice, like I said, you want to add hot sauce, or a nice finish too is a little tiny splash of sesame oil. Sesame oil, a little goes a long way. I'm literally going to add like 1/8 of a teaspoon. So just a little tiny bit. And it gives it this really nice aroma. I've talked about sesame oil in the past, but sesame oil is one that you don't want to stir fry in because it's just not a good stir frying oil. It's great in this use to season the filling for the wontons, to finish off your dish with just giving it that beautiful, it's so nice. I can smell it so easily. And a little goes a long way. So you don't use sesame oil the same way you use olive oil or vegetable oil, just a little tiny bit. And like I said, if you have I have some cilantro in the fridge, I might add a little cilantro, maybe a squeeze of lemon, whatever you want, but boom.
Gorgeous. That's beautiful.
So, yeah. So I got through my 2 dishes. I don't have I'll, if there's questions, we can do that, and I can work on the bonus dish if we want to do that. Whatever works for everybody. Or Shelley, if you have anything else to add.
Well, I wanted to add something about sweetness. I think a lot of the call for candies and candied fruits and dried nuts and dried fruits and things like that. But there's a couple of interesting fruits that are traditional. Generally, Arash was looking for the sumo. the sumo orange. So I did a little bit of, they're not quite there yet, but he's got the mandarins there. Mandarins are symbolic for fullness, wealth, that kind of thing. And then also melons symbolize good health and growth. Melons are not technically in season, but they are a symbolic Chinese New Year tradition as well. So yeah, I encourage you all to try a sumo orange. I'm going to be going out and looking for that. I can't remember the last time I've had one, but they're extremely sweet. They have a lot of sugar in them. They're big. They have a ton of vitamin C. Don't juice them, eat them.
Yeah, sumo citrus. A couple of years ago, I noticed I started seeing them everywhere. And I think they just launched a giant marketing campaign where, like, you used to just see them at the farmer's market. And now I see them at Trader Joe's. I see them at Safeway. I see them all over the place. And they kind of look like an orange with a little, like, knob on top.
Like a sumo hairstyle. That's where they come from.
Like hairstyle. So they're really tasty. I couldn't get any for today. But as Shelley was saying, yes, citrus. This is citrus season. Don't eat oranges in the summer. Eat peaches. Eat oranges now. Mandarins, oranges, tangerines.
Our tree is loaded.
Vitamin C. What's that?
Our orange tree is loaded right now. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, in California, I mean, there are, in my neighborhood, there's probably a dozen lemon and a dozen orange and grapefruit trees all just exploding within like 2 blocks of my house. So we're lucky that way. But if you live where it's a good time to get your hands on produce, on citrus, because it's the season and you're getting the freshest citrus you can. So so it's really, and that's a part of, like Shelley was saying, a part of Chinese New Year. But keep your eye out for those sumos. Try them out. They are the single best citrus out there. I'm telling you, they are like candy. They're so good.
If you need vitamin C for wounds, or if you're taking iron, eat them with that, because that'll help you absorb your iron.
So where do you find this fruit typically out and about? Not at the Safeway, do you?
What did
I
you
think
say?
they're everywhere now. Lucky,
they?
Safeway, yeah.
They have them at Safeway when they're in season. So the season is usually January to April, and we're nearing the end of January, and I haven't seen a lot of them. So I'm thinking the season's a little late. So in the next week or two, wherever you shop, keep an eye out. And they, like I said, they've launched a huge marketing campaign. They like to put them in the front of the store. I think they've realized people like them, and they're really easy to eat. They're easy to peel. They're not really stringy. They don't have seeds. They're incredible.
They have a really thick, bumpy skin, and then that top knot. Look for that. Sumo is a brand. It's not the kind of orange. It's an actual brand, and they're like a navel mandarin pomelo mix hybrid.
I just wanted to show our last bonus dish that I probably won't have time to do now, but I just wanted to show you all. This is the bok choy from my garden. So if you live in California, don't think you can't garden in the winter. This is all like exploding, and it likes the cooler temperatures. It does better when it gets cold at night, which where I live, it gets to, low 40s, even high 30s sometimes at night. And this just loves it, much like cauliflower and broccoli. So my last dish is going to be just a simple stir fry of bok choy and shiitake mushrooms. A lot of Chinese New Year dishes, because there's a lot of decadence. There's dumplings, there's whole fish, there's things that are very celebratory. They always like to have a nice, simple vegetable on the side in addition to everything. So however you want to do it, keep that in mind to get in the spirit. I'm literally just going to stir fry these in a little bit of vegetable oil, a little splash of soy sauce, and the same stuff, just to keep it simple. But this is where, if you get more familiar, you can start playing around with different ingredients and getting more comfortable with that. So, and add a little bit of garlic and ginger. So garlic, ginger, scallions, those 3 things are very, very widely used in all over Chinese cuisine. I don't even want to generalize, because China is a massive country with like probably 50 different distinct culinary cuisines, but garlic, ginger pretty much is all over. And scallions, like I said, green onions, we call them, they are pretty abundant. You'll see those more than like shallots or yellow onions or red onions. So if you're new to it, get some of these ingredients, try them out, and it's super fun. But I just did want to mention that last dish for our Lunar New Year celebration.
All right, this was Shelley. Even I started drooling.
Good.
So you're
Finally, I'm
alone.
not the only one drooling.
I think I can pick you
That
up. And
says a
we'll be
lot
at-
because Franklin told me recently that he basically doesn't like any vegetable. So
No, that's not quite true. You're
I was
slightly
there. Oh
exaggerating.
no, I was
No,
there.
but Shelley, I can pick you up and we'll be at Arash's for in about an hour, and I
Okay,
will go
I'm
to
ready
town on
now.
those dumplings. Arash, thank you so much again, and thanks to Britta, our expert videographer over there, who works behind the scenes, everyone, and thank you, Shelley, for sharing all your wonderful insight and knowledge. So once again, everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. We will be sending you the recording of tonight's session, as well as the recipes that Arash is going to be putting together for you at some point this weekend. We just don't know where, but you will get them at some point this weekend. And so look for that. And next month, we have what, Arash? I forget already.
oh, I think I forgot to. I think we're going to do
But-
Vietnamese,
Okay,
I believe, but I could be wrong.
I
But
think you're
we
probably
heard
right.
the requests for people that some of the feedback we received is people like themes and different cuisines of the world. So we're trying to respond to that.
I think it's
that's why
Persian New
tonight-
Year, isn't it? Persian.
No, that'll be
First
in
New Year's
March.
March.
Yeah, we have quite a
We
culinary.
shuffled
sort
it
of,
around a little bit,
Yeah,
didn't
we
we?
have quite a
Okay.
did.
culinary calendar for you guys in store. So hope you'll join us for the future sessions. So
Yeah.
thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Arash, again for welcoming us into your warm kitchen. And thanks, Shelley, for all your insight. Have a good night, everyone. And look for the email from us this weekend. Okay. Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
care.
you.
Happy New Year.
You too.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Happy